think of harming our health. Thanks for the recording. An America where there is redress for the trauma, the pain, and the war that America has brought to countless nations and countries in the Pacific, and is interested in creating economic opportunities for communities that are hidden because of the myth that Asians are rich. An America where no one even thinks about all of these issues, where we can really live our best and full lives. One of the largest barriers that we hear across the sector, particularly in philanthropy, is that we just don't know enough about Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. There's not enough data. There's not enough resources. We're getting caricatures from the media, and we're here to talk about that today. We, in the field, researchers, organizers, and activists have been working furiously to ensure that Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities are accurately represented in the most critical data efforts, including the census. And we're also interested in talking about disaggregating the data. So that brings us to today's webinar, and I'm very excited to introduce our speakers. So today we have Daphne Kwok, Vice President of AAPI Audience Strategy at AARP, Angela Houghton, Manager of Audience Research at AARP, David Dutwin, Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at NORC, Kevin Hirano, Deputy Director at APIA Vote, and Vivian Peng, Lead Data Scientist at the Rockefeller Foundation. And before I pass it, I just want to talk about the agenda here today. So we've got a 1-hour session, and we'll be spending the first 3 components, or first 3 sections of this, this webinar, talking about the background and context setting, Amplify AAPI initiative, and how they were established, and then connecting this back to the audience here at APIP, which is the relevance to philanthropy. So we're spending the next 30 minutes on those 3 topics, and then transitioning to a Q&A section. A couple of ground rules before I pass it to Daphne. You probably already know this. It's been 3 years of Zoom, so please stay unmuted. Please be respectful in the chats. If you have any questions, please let us know. Once we get to the Q&A section, we'll be taking live questions, so be prepared to raise your hand and ask questions and come on to video and unmuting. Okay, now that we're settled, I want to pass it to Daphne.
Thank you so much, Brandon, and happy AANHPI History Heritage Month to everybody. May 2nd, and I know probably everyone on this call has already been to several events that are happening in the AAPI community. Thank you to Pat, to Brandon, and to APIP for this tremendous opportunity to address all of you. I see a lot of my friends on this call, and thank you for taking the time as well. So we're going to kick off our month to talk about the most important issue impacting our AANHPI community. In fact, it is the one issue that can determine each and every one of our futures. It's data, data, and data. My career has been in service to the AANHPI community, and I, like every single one of you I know, I'm sure of, we're all so tired of searching, research, survey, polls, looking for how AANHPI show up in the data, just to find that we're classified in the other category, or hearing that AANHPIs are statistically insignificant, or hearing that it's just too expensive to do research on our community, and then also hearing that it's just too expensive, too difficult, too complex to have disaggregated data by ethnicity. So ever since I've been at AARP for the last 10 years now, and so excited that AARP has a research department, I've been joined at the hip for the last 10 years with my great colleague, Angela Houghton, who is one of our tremendous champions. And we've been working to try to figure out how can we tackle this great challenge. And so now we have something that we want to share with all of you, and that's the focus of today's conversation. So I'm going to turn it over now to my good friend, Kevin Hirano, who was one of your colleagues and peers when he was with Open Society, and now he's with APIA Vote, so from the community side as well, to be able to share some of his thoughts on why this project that we are unveiling with all of you today is so important, and hope that all of you will be part of it as well too. So Kevin, I want to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Daphne. It's an incredible opportunity to speak to all of you about this really important topic about data. So at API Vote, we're the leading nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to creating a culture of civic engagement. And today, it's a perfect example. The census just put out its new data on voter turnout. And one of the most glaring pieces of data that came out, Asian Americans turned out to vote over 10% higher in early voting. And you've heard this a consistent kind of news beat after the point on every news channel after elections after 2020. Asian Americans are turning out in historic numbers. That means no one can afford to ignore us anymore. But the problem is we are still excluded, as Daphne said, from so many polls. Asian API Vote has been very lucky to be able to partner with AARP to conduct this Asian American voter survey every federal election for a number of years. And it's the earliest pre-election survey done in language in the top 7 Asian American languages, and it's being quoted. It's being quoted by a number of not top pollsters, but it's pretty much the only one, except for a few others out of the Asian American space, including NAPOP. And that's for a couple of reasons. As I would just reiterate. I spoke at Emerson College, which does the Emerson College pollsters, about this issue about the Asian American and Pacific Islander electorate. And I was surprised that the basic question comes from these incredibly intelligent pollsters who've been doing this work for such a long time. Is basic question like, what languages do we do this? Like, how do we know where people are? And so it boils down to basically pollsters and others just don't even know what resources exist within our community, the network, the ecosystem that has been nurtured. Thanks a lot to Daphne, who's been doing this for such a long time, with self-mothered a vast ecosystem network of organizations who have really built out Asian Americans as an electorate that needs to be paid attention to, because we are the margin of victory, or at least becoming a significant portion of that margin of victory. And so the project that I think Angela and AARP are proposing is really an incredible opportunity to address this data issue, and that will achieve something that will be light years ahead of where we are now in a very short period of time. Because the fact is, this disinvestment has happened for too long, and the opportunity is too great as we look at the 23-24 election cycle.
So I'm going to jump in here now, and thanks so much, Kevin and Daphne, for sort of framing up the issue and the lack of data, and how you all talked about what the problem and the challenge is from your point of view. And I think we also saw the previous slide that is allowed to be perpetuated when we have lacking or missing data. That there's also that leads to a real dearth of narratives and storytelling and portrayals of representation and inclusion in American life. And so we have only a limited number of stories. Can you guys hear me?
I think we're having a little bit of trouble, Angela. Maybe if you try with your video off, we might be able to hear you a little bit clearer.
No.
No, it doesn't work.
It was fine when we tested it, so I don't know what happened.
At all? Let me try with this.
Is this any different?
Oh, much better.
Perfect.
Much better.
Okay, you say yes, but I can't hear you now. That's okay. Maybe I don't need to hear you. Can you still hear me, Brandon?
Yes. Yeah, we hear you.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, great. Sorry about that. So I'll just move on to now talking about the reasons why we see this persistent problem of data inequity, data gaps, lack of representation and inclusion in traditional public data sources, primarily when we're talking about polling and survey research. So Kevin mentioned the ecosystem, and really that is, what we have identified is this lack of infrastructure, and that sort of leads to this mutually reinforcing cycle of high costs, or those two things are really interconnected. So without going into too much technical detail, I'll just give a background of sort of the broader context of the polling field broadly. There's been a real migration toward away from some of the old methods of reaching people, like on telephone and even with mail surveys, and a lot of the data collection is pushed to web-based surveys. And to further improve the cost efficiencies, what has happened in the field is this panel resource. So what a panel is, we've been talking about this as a panel solution, and that might not really be clear to people what it is. It's really just building a pool of people who agree to sort of be ready to participate in survey research projects or answer survey questions for you. So you kind of do a one-time effort to do outreach, a randomized selection of people, invite them to be part of this group who will participate in research. And so you do that one-time investment to build the resource, the panel or the pool of people. And then you can have, for each individual time you want to reach out to them and field survey questions or ask them questions, it lowers the costs. So that has been the model that's really proliferated in the space. But all of those existing panels are only built currently in English and Spanish language. So when people go out and build panels, they do recruitment typically in English and Spanish. Spanish is almost, I would say, cost of doing business these days, but I don't know of any that exist that they have actually built the panel in any Asian languages. So that's one distinction here, and one thing that continues to, that we see that we still have this ongoing problem of incomplete or inaccurate representation or inclusion of AA and HPI communities. So, and with that lack of infrastructure, it makes it very expensive to get that sort of scientific randomized selection of AA and HPI communities to represent and project from your small sample of people that you talk to. If it's 1,000 people, you want to have the confidence to say this is also true for the whole population. So in order to do that, you really have to randomly select people, and that becomes very expensive if you're just going off on a one-time effort to do it. And what then often happens is people who may be very well intentioned and may really want to include or do a survey of these of AA and HPI communities, or if they're doing a national survey and they want to make sure they're able to analyze the data for AA and HPI communities, if they don't have the funding or the resources, it often just doesn't get done. There's also the incremental costs of translating the survey itself, but I would almost say that is kind of incidental to the cost of finding, recruiting, inviting people to participate in a survey. So hopefully that makes some sense without being too technical about why we have this ongoing barrier or problem that we've identified to address. So as Daphne mentioned earlier in her remarks, at AARP, we've really kind of been on a journey over the past several years where we had continued to want to do research to include AA and HPI communities in our research, but always running up against the challenge of needing very large budgets in order to do it right and to be able to do it at the level of rigor that we do for other groups, or when we are standing up and sharing data publicly, and we would inevitably always get asked the question, well, where are AAPI communities? And then to have to say, oh, we don't have it, or we couldn't do it, or it was too expensive. it's just not defensible anymore in our estimation. So we said, let's stop just saying we can't do it and figure out how to do it. So we initially in 2018, when we started on this, started to first take our very first steps, we held a convening where we talked to a lot of leaders and experts in AAPI research, and we started to brainstorm solutions. And one of the solutions that we landed on was a panel, because that was where we saw the field was really moving for addressing cost efficiencies and building infrastructure. And we said, there is no existing resource like a panel to do survey research, and we should build one. So we started the conversations, realizing that it would really take a lot of collaboration. You can go to the next slide, Brandon. Thank you. We started having initial conversations with stakeholders. We started to really pull people together, and we said, we're going to go and build. We have a very bold vision, and we really want to have this audacious goal of building this first AANHPI focus panel for data collection, and it would be recruited and supported in Asian languages. And so we began the conversations and reaching out to other organizations who we know also share this, frustration and agree that there is a need for it. We also had this ready partner in NORC at the University of Chicago, who, by the way, are experts in panel building, and they also currently run the leading I'd say gold standard in a probability panel of Americans called AmeriSpeak. And in a moment, I'll hand it over to David to talk more about that. But since we had NORC and we had this partnership between AARP Research and NORC already in doing panel work for older adults, we said, let's leverage the expertise that they have in panel building, and also with pursuing underrepresented and harder to reach groups, and also pair that with our AARP's through Daphne's leadership, an amazing leadership and network. She has so many contacts within the community, and also AARP is frequently in the position of playing the role of a convener to bring stakeholders together for solutions. We also have a strategy on disparities, and we know that data equity is critical, especially when we want to address disparities for AA and NHPI communities. So this fit really in line with our strategic plan on how to address health and wealth disparities. So I want to hand it over now to David Dutwin from NORC, who will talk a little bit more about NORC's expertise that they're bringing to this effort, as well as the specifics of this panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela. Really an absolute pleasure to be here today, and really thrilled to announce Amplify API. That it's something that folks have been talking about for quite a while, many years, in fact. And in fact, we are actually recruiting as we speak, which is really exciting. We have a long way to go. We're just starting, we're on mile 2 of the marathon, but we're really excited that we're in the race and going. So as Angela mentioned, one of the really important things that I wanted to start with is data quality. There are many ways nowadays to do survey research, and they vary greatly in terms of their ability to properly represent populations. We at NORC and in AmeriSpeak in particular are really strongly committed to representative samples via randomized sampling. There's nothing else out there that really can guarantee proper representation than doing things with random selection. And so, unfortunately, we do get at times people saying, oh, can I be part of the panel? I'd like to participate and be a panelist. And unfortunately, we have to do the selecting. We randomize addresses and we select in a randomized fashion. We do so in a way that we use a lot of different techniques to maximize the likelihood of reaching an AANHPI household, so that we can mitigate costs, but we do it in a very scientific manner. Ultimately, our aspirational goal is to be able to recruit a panel of 7,000 members. We don't force people to take surveys when we have one available. We reach out to them Hopefully they participate, but typically in our experience in panels, about half the time people will participate at best, oftentimes about a third. We like to have this pool out there. And so whenever a given survey occurs, there's enough folks that are available in the next couple of days to do that survey. So by getting a cohort of about 7,000 panelists, we know that we'll be able to support samples of 3,000, surveys of 3,000. Why do we like 3,000? Certainly, this is a really sort of a large size. There's a lot of work, a lot of great research you can do at, say, 1,000 interviews, but at 3,000, we're really able to guarantee that not only do we have highly stable and accurate data overall for the AANHPI population, but as well that we're able to produce valid statistical estimates for subgroups as well. Particularly the largest 6 Asian subgroups plus NHPI as well as a 7th group, and then as an 8th group, kind of the remainder of smaller Asian subgroups. So at 3,000, we're able to really have a survey where at least 300 interviews are conducted in each of those 6 subgroups plus NHPI. We are recruiting in Chinese dialects, Korean and Vietnamese, and of course, will be administering surveys in these languages as well. Aspirationally, we'd love to add Tagalog as well, and possibly others, but for now, that's based on census data. This really goes a really long way in covering what the census called are linguistically isolated households, a household that has no adult member that can speak English well enough to participate in a survey. By covering these interviews, you end up covering about 90% of AANHPI linguistically isolated households. So these are really important to have. Again, just to sort of add a little color commentary to what Angela said in terms of cost efficiencies. It is, of course, very expensive to build a panel, to get people integrated, to recruit them, to empanel them, to keep them active. But the goal here, again, is sort of amortization, if you will, that over time, AmeriSpeak is a perfect example. We launched AmeriSpeak as a national sample, general population sample in 2015. We try to find a real good sort of Goldilocks zone where we're asking people, we try to not ask people to do a survey more than once a week, and more typically it's maybe twice a month. And I call it Goldilocks because you're keeping them engaged, but you're not kind of overtaxing them. Folks do get enumerated to do surveys. They get points that they can convert into cash or other sorts of gifts. So beyond just contributing to their community, which we really push as a really important feature for being part of this panel, they do get some remuneration as well. But so in AmeriSpeak as an example, you think about someone who joined in 2015, and we still have people who joined in 2015 and they're active members. They've done a survey every couple of weeks, so you can imagine they've done literally dozens of surveys at this point. And so when you defray the cost of this building of the panel across a couple of dozen surveys, you get to the point where these surveys are the same price, the same cost as any typical general population survey done in the United States. Literally, it's typically the case that a survey just conducted for the AANHPI community alone will cost something like 8 times as much as a general population survey of the United States. Again, because it's very expensive to screen out households. You reach a household, they want to participate, but they're not AANHPI, so you got to give up on them and go to the next household and see if they're NHPI. And that's a very expensive proposition. So being able to literally reduce the cost 8-fold with this kind of approach is really going to open up research to this community in a way that no other approach can achieve. The panel will be multimodal, both in recruiting and in participating in surveys. We recognize that there is a small but still meaningful population out there that does not prefer to do surveys over the web or doesn't really have effective internet access still. But that's okay. We allow people, we send them letters of recruitment. They're allowed to go online to join or to call us to join. And then when they do surveys, when they join, we ask them what they prefer, online or phone, or even in limited cases, mail. And that's how we'll reach out to them in the future. So we try to make the access as widespread as possible by offering this multimodal approach. And again, before we jump to the next slide, just one last thing here, the second to last bullet. I really want to reiterate, because I think of all the bullets, this is the really most important thing, I think, to all of us, that this is a panel sort of by and for a community. We've done this with other communities and subgroups in the United States, and it really is the case. People join because they really want to give their community a voice, and we want to stress that to folks. And then the ability to do research, there's kind of like this great cycle that happens. And so again, we're really excited to be able to produce this kind of data product, again, sort of by and for the community. Next slide. So there's 4 boxes here, sort of going from smallest to largest. This is really nice and sort of detailing folks who've been involved and how this has all come to be. AARP really started this off, over 3 years ago, really thinking about the importance of needing some sort of data access for the AANHPI community. We have a relationship with AARP and doing research of the 50+ population and other groups, and so they kind of pulled us in and at NORC, and we've been just thrilled to be part of this. And so we've established this lead partnership between the two organizations, but we have some really fantastic flagship funders that are a part of this right now. We're getting some recruiting help from some folks. The Blue Shield of California Foundation, AAPI Data, and Rockefeller have in particular provided funding to allow this first initial build, the first half of year 1 of the build to happen. And again, that is happening. We are currently recruiting with the funding that Blue Shield provided. We are getting our ducks in order to realize the funding given from Rockefeller and AAPI Data / UC Riverside for recruitments that will happen in about a month to 2 months from now. And then we have our highly engaged group of AAPI researchers and advocates from APAI Vote, onward down the line, Asian American Foundation and others. Really, this couldn't happen without them supporting us. Already, we've been able to leverage their logos and names in our recruitment materials and on the website. This is really critically important. Of course, I also just do want to mention as well, Pew is not a financial supporter, but they have donated essentially. They do about every 10 years a major AAPI survey. At the end of that survey, they've added on a recruitment battery. So we're now recontacting folks that participated in that survey. So we're really grateful to them as well. So we have just a real great group of organizations here supporting us, helping us either directly or indirectly. And then, of course, there's the largest of the blocks here, the users and stakeholders. This is a panel, a data resource that we want to have for all to be able to access. Industry, nonprofit, government, academic users, all able to utilize the panel for their own survey research, for their own data projects. And of course, that's what this is really at the end of the day all about. It's great, and critically important to have the funders and the advisors and the community partners, but it's really at the end of the day being built for the users and stakeholders. They're really the most important group of all. And so hopefully a lot of you will become users and stakeholders in the future. And so I just want to express my gratitude ahead of time for really, we can build it, but unless people utilize it, it's not going to realize the potential that we set out to have. So with that, let's just jump to the next slide and just talk about some milestones really quickly. We are in year one of the build. We did have a year zero, if you will, which was 2022, where we conducted a pilot. AARP provided funding to test out our design, to prove the concept that this can be built and built for costs that we understand, and to understand what kind of cross-section we get. One thing I kind of skipped over a little bit before is, again, the importance we really have in not just making a panel that's representative of the AANHPI community and as a whole, but to really be able to build a panel that represents each group in particular. It would be very easy to build a panel that is nationally distributed, in which Chinese would be the largest group and then on down the line. But we really want to make sure some of those mid-level groups, in particular, Japanese, Vietnamese, Filipino, NHPI, of course, are able to be represented. And the pilot really gave us key data to understand how to recruit in a way that's scientifically valid, but is also able to target each of those groups effectively. So that was a very successful pilot in 2022. We're now in this initial build in 2023. We hope to reach a minimum really just within a couple of months, and to actually field our first survey in June. That will be what's called an omnibus survey. An omnibus survey is a survey where multiple people can essentially gain access to a single survey. So NORC/AARP will field the survey. And if you want to add 3 questions, you can add 3 questions. If you want to add 10 of your own questions, you can add 10 of your own questions. So there may be many different organizations that contribute to that survey. We hope to field one of those once every month. This is a great opportunity, particularly for people who might not have a full-scale budget to do a large, 15-minute standalone survey, but they have, 3, 4, 5, 10 questions that they want to ask. This is the way to do it. So we'll be fielding those shortly. You can see our financial goals on the bottom here. Our goal is to be able to fund year one with about $1.5 million. And then another 3 in year 2 and another 1.5 in year 3. And that'll get us to the full 7,000 panelists. We are fairly close to our year 1 goals, but still have work to do. And of course, we have a lot of work to do in year 2 and year 3, 2024 and 2025. So we are working very hard to find others. Perhaps there are some of you out there that can help as well. To be able to fund this build. No amount really is too small. It all is just incredibly useful to make this panel a reality. So with that, I think I'll hand it off to Vivian for the next slide.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Vivian. I'm a lead data scientist at the Rockefeller Foundation. And as David mentioned, we are an early funder for the survey panel. So previously, I have worked across the public health and government sectors and have felt the problem of data inequity so deeply. And it's been really frustrating and painful, as Daphne mentioned, to consistently see this community left out of research. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak with you all today and share some perspective as an early funder for this panel. We really see so much potential for this survey panel to help in philanthropy work. This is an opportunity to bring more visibility to the lived realities of the AA and NHPI community and expose the gap between our specific needs and access to the resources in health, education, economic opportunity, and more. As mentioned in APIP's Seeking to Soar research, historically less than 1% of foundation giving in the United States has been designated for the AA and NHPI communities. And I believe a contributing factor to this phenomenon is the systemic data gaps mentioned earlier in this conversation, since you can't build solutions for problems that aren't visible or elevated to the national policy level. So that's really why data is powerful. We can bring visibility to these issues. And being able to quantify and show this at scale, the lived realities of this population, is something that we have not been able to do until now. So for us as a foundation, we started getting into this work because of a data gap that we identified. We were interested in looking at food access in the US, and through our research noticed that the AANHPI population was historically left out of research. And as a result, they have limited access to things like SNAP and other benefits. My colleague Taz and I both identify as part of the AANHPI community and recognize that what was being represented in research was not a true reflection of the realities we were seeing in our day-to-day lives. So through talking with other organizations, we came to realize that we, working in philanthropy, were in the right position to help create the opportunity for this kind of data to be collected. So we were really excited to see and hear about this survey panel opportunity and become early funders. In addition to helping build out the panel, we're also planning to run a survey that explores food and nutrition security in this demographic group. So we see potential where this survey can help fill gaps for other sectors as well. And in addition to just doing the research itself, we really believe it's important for philanthropic organizations and other researchers to be able to connect and collaborate. So how do we go beyond creating just one-off research projects and products, and how do we break the silos and be able to collaborate and contribute to this work together? So at the foundation, we are really committed to open collaboration, and we do this by really trying to make our data work from the survey be available and accessible to the community and other researchers. And we believe that is a way of giving back the power. And also within our foundation, we are looking to build a interfoundational data science group. So stay tuned for that. I'm happy to connect with anyone who would be interested in talking more about that. And we also occasionally invite speakers to come and have a dialogue with our group. So just really want to encourage, how do we go beyond the research and by making data public and accessible, and also have more collaborations within the philanthropy space and also with other researchers. So thank you so much for everyone for coming and joining us for this discussion today. Before we wrap up, we do want to open the floor to any questions you may have. So I'll hand it back over to Brandon.
Thanks, Vivian. And real quickly, before we go to the Q&A session, the Seeking to Soar report that Vivian mentioned, I want to underscore that a little bit. So the quote that Vivian had was less than 1%. In fact, it's actually 0.2% of philanthropic funding that's going to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities. For some scale, for every $100 that goes out of the door from philanthropic institutions, that's 20 cents that's going to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities. So yeah, that's really small. So we're going to transition now to the Q&A section. If you have some questions, please feel free to raise your hands and we'll call on you. And we'll just go in the order that folks are arranging themselves with the raise hand feature. Before we go there, we've received several questions during registration, and I think many of them have now been answered with this presentation, but there is one that we would like to focus on, and I'll pass this question to our speakers to answer it. The question is, what has been the greatest challenge to collect this information? And if there's just one thing participants of the session can do to promote this work, what should it be?
So I can just quickly start. What's been most difficult? It's kind of a twofold answer. Certainly just the difficulty of any survey endeavor of what's considered a low incidence population, where the prevalence of a population is under 10%, is always very difficult, very expensive, requires sophisticated techniques to do well and to do cost effectively. Luckily, I like to think we were certainly up for that challenge, and certainly as well, multilingual surveys are very challenging. A colleague of mine basically once likened it as you know, if you're doing 5 languages, you're basically doing 5 surveys at the exact same time. Like that, there's very little economies of scale. You really have a large factor of increased work. But I know we'll get better at that in time as we do survey after survey. So I think, you know, again, we're going to overcome that challenge as well.
Thanks, David. I see James Liu.
Hi all, thank you so much for the presentation. DeQuinn encouraged me to raise this at the end here. David, is there a way eventually or now to get invitation codes to disseminate locally among our networks, especially if you have a need for a certain sort of language spoken or geographies?
Yeah, you know, it's unfortunately the case that again, for survey research to be really scientifically rigorous, we have to be able to randomize addresses and invite from those random sets of addresses. So we, as much as God, we would love to be able to you know, do what some people in the industry call like a coupon system, like you're saying, like give people sort of RSVP letters of invitation so their friends and colleagues can join. Unfortunately, we can't recruit that way and end up with a panel that people will consider to be scientifically valid. So yeah, unfortunately, we have to do it the hard way.
And add a little bit to that, though. I think, you know, one thing that we would like, you know, is still, if you want to help get the word out about the panel in your networks or to different communities, to let them know that if an invitation does come in your mailbox, please respond to it, that, you know, this is how the communities are heard and represented. You know, there will be, it's sort of like publicizing before the, you know, part of the recruitment, and also to engender trust, because we know that there is, you know, trust is critical for getting participation in survey research, and with good reason. But we hope that we've, you know, tried to really put our credentials out there as trustworthy organizations. And but still, if people don't know us, then it's probably not likely to immediately be something someone's excited to jump in and respond to. But if community partners and organizations can say, this is a good, you know, project, we really endorse this, and that really goes a long way to helping us get better response.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks,
And I
folks.
thought I could just answer this really quickly. There was in the chat, Lan asked about age representation. I believe it was. The short of it is the pilot looked really good. It is very typical that surveys tend to sometimes skew to being a little bit too old. That was absolutely not the case in the pilot. We had a really accurate cross-section by age. So we're very happy to get a good, robust cohort of both old and young.
Thanks, David. There are a few other questions. It seems like they're panel specific. So in the Q&A, we've got, curious if the panel size would allow for crosstabs to analyze data at the state or regional level. And then another question about, would the panel also eventually allow for rigorous or deep qualitative research?
Yeah, so qualified yes to both. There will be states that we can certainly project. I mean, California right off the bat, and as it grows to, again, aspirationally 7,000, probably about a third of states will have a large enough group of panelists to be able to break out at the full scale size of the build. Oh my God, I just forgot your second question. Qualitative, yes. So we do this now with AmeriSpeak, and we can certainly do it here where given a certain need for qualitative research, we can reach out to panelists and ask them if they want to participate you know, in an in-depth interview or a focus group or whatever that may be. So for sure there would be access to that here as well.
I'm actually really excited about that question, because I think that, you know, qualitative data is so powerful in storytelling, and it also allows us to really highlight experiences from even smaller sub-ethnic populations or groups. So I think that if we're able to leverage this not only for the large quantitative, 3,000 sample size surveys, but also to use it to do that qualitative exploration, it will really go a long way.
Thanks, folks. A few questions here in the chat that I'm trying to parse through. One question about assuring you are saturating outreach in diverse communities, especially Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities.
Yeah, so we certainly take representing NHPI really seriously. It's a very challenging group to recruit because there's for a number of technical reasons. I mean, they're small. There's a lot of island nations that comprise of this. People consider it as sort of one term, but there's many subgroups within there. And so, but we have some really good strategies we built over the years. This is a group that I've been asked, UCLA and others have asked me to sort of build and try and design surveys to interview. So I have some pretty good knowledge of how to be able to target them. And again, a way that's effective, cost effective, but also scientifically rigorous. So we use some census data, we use some what's called big data analysis and other tricks in the book to be able to identify households we think likely have NHPI in them and try to recruit them.
Okay, I think we might have time for one last question. Sorry, folks, there's a lot of questions here in the chat, and so Queen and the team will be following up. There's going to be a follow-up email. They're taking all these questions down, and there will be some follow-up. So unfortunately, we don't have enough time to capture all of these questions and answer all of them. But I do want to raise just this last one. This is specific to community and academic groups. Once this panel is scaled and reaches a self-sustaining phase, will using the Amplify API panel be usable and affordable for these groups for their research and advocacy?
Sorry, for which groups?
Community and academic groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anything, that's exactly who we want to be able to utilize this resource as much as anyone else.
Beautiful. I'm going to pass it to Daphne now. I believe Daphne is going to close us out.
Thank you. Wow, the chat, the questions in the chat and the comments in the chat and recommendations, we're going to capture all of that. So really thank you for such thoughtful comments and questions in there. And then as we said, we will also get back to you as well too. So as we close out, I really want to thank you for your time. And we hope that you really will join us hopefully as an investor. We would love to be able to have you as an investor or as one that is endorsing this project. That would be very helpful as well too. We hope that you'll follow us on our website, and the QR code that's on the slide right now would be one way to be able to do so. And we also have put information in the chat as well. We are going to be following up with a handout as well. This session has been recorded for those that were not able to join us. And I hope that you'll really, if there are people or networks or groups that you think that this presentation would be helpful to be able to present to, we would love to be able to do that as well. As we've said, that we are in the fundraising phase right now to raise $3 million for this year so that we can get to the next phase of our work. And so any help that you might have, any interest you may have, your entity, your organization, or if you know entities and funders that would be interested in this work, we very much would love to be able to have those introductions as well too. And so I just want to thank all of you for your time. We have our contact information. Please reach out as well too. And thank you once again to AAPIP and Brandon for really guiding us through today's session. So thank you so much.
Thanks, folks. Special thanks to our speakers. round of applause if you're able to, but everyone's running out of the door. So that takes us out. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, folks. And we'll end the session here. Thank you so much. Happy May.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.